Welcome to part 8 of our rewriting of the KidsCanCode shoot 'em up, and today we're doing it in C# and Monogame. So we're adding explosions today. The repository here has, I'll put the link in the description, so we've got the Monogame code here, and also I've added to the repository generally a zip file containing the explosions for animations for this episode. They came from Kenney, which I've credited in here, but apparently the opengameart doesn't appear to have the images anymore, and I didn't want to overload. They are available in KidsCanCode link. Didn't want to overload his website that he's obviously hosting them, so it's probably better for you to get them off GitHub. So let's go back to the code and show you what this one does. Right, hit play. Okay, so what I'm doing this time, as you can see, the bullets are interacting with the mobs and causing these explosions, and I allow myself to get hit so that my shield goes down to 0, and then there's a final explosion of the player. There we go. And as you can see, the explosion sound and visuals played, and once they'd finished, the game finishes. So this episode goes through how all that lot is done. So first of all, we need to add to the main code here some extra variables. So we've done some lists here. We've got a texture 2D list of explosions mob, a texture 2D list of explosions player, and then an explosion list, and then a single explosion, death explosion. So the reason for having these is that the list of texture 2Ds mob and player holds the sets of images, which, if I can find them in the content, there we go. So we've got regular explosions 0 to 8, and then we've got sonic explosions 0 to 8. So that's why the two lots are here. So the explosions mob contains regular explosions 0 to 8, and explosions player contains the sonic explosions, which if I hover over these, as you can see, does actually show, which is quite handy. I didn't realise it did that. Show the images that we're going to be loading in. The explosion list is used in the same way as the bullet list and the mob lists. So they hold a list of the currently playing objects of that particular class. So once we've created an explosion, it'll be stored in the explosion list. The one exception to that is the death explosion when the player is killed, because this one is used to terminate the game, so it's important that that one is kept entirely separate. So let's show you how these are loaded in. So as usual, in the load content function, here it is, we've now got a new function here called load explosions. So let's show you what that does. So it now initiates the three lists that we were showing up there: explosions mob, player, and explosion list, just giving them empty values. And then we're doing a for loop here running between 0 and 8, so that we can load in each of those images here by using the content load, and we're using the interpolated string $symbol here, so that what we're doing is in the image stroke folder, which is this one up here, img, we're then fitting in a regular explosion 0 and then adding in whatever number. So it starts off at 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2 as it goes through the loop and it's adding it into explosions mob, and it's at the same time doing a similar thing with the player explosions using sonic explosion 0, 0, 0, 1, etc. So that just adds those to the list. So that's how the explosions are loaded in, using the content.load, texture 2D, and then picking each of the images in turn. So let's close that one off. Right, I think we'll go and look at the explosion class now. So brand new class, all the monogame stuff and system collections generic, because we're going to be using a list. And inside the class here we've got some properties, which is a list of images, the center where the images are going to emanate from, the scale of those images, whether or not they're active, or the associated rectangle, and then a single image file here, the frame, time passed, and frame rate, which we'll come back to in a second. So the constructor here takes the image list, so it'll be passed either a list containing the regular explosions or the sonic explosions. The center where it's going to display from is passed in, and the scale. So in the case of the mobs, when a bullet hits the mob, we want the explosion to start at that point. In the Pygame version I used the center of the mob as the center of the explosion. In the Love2D version I used the top of the bullet as it hit the mob. It's up to you which one you choose. I can't even remember which one I used here. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And then the scale, I generally scale the mob explosions down by a half, but again you could scale it proportionate to the size of the mob. I haven't bothered with that, but easy enough to make these changes. So the constructor puts the image list and the stuff that we've passed as parameters into these variables here. The image becomes the first image in the list, active is set to true, and then the rectangle is set to the size and shape and height and width and the scale of the first image. Now in the update function, what we're doing here is we want each of these images to play or show for a certain amount of time, and then after a bit of time has passed to move on to the next image, and that time is set up here. So we have set the frame rate as 0.1 seconds. So we've got 8 images, and if we change it every 0.1 seconds, then obviously all 8 will show in 0.8 seconds. You can change that if you want it to speed up or a bit slower. 0.1 is what I used in the Pygame and the Love2D, so it seems to work, so I've left it at that. But by all means play with this setting here if you want it to go quicker or to slow down, but the value it's at seems to work all right. So the way this works is that the time passed, which was starting off at 0, is increased by delta time, and once times passed has got greater than the frame rate, which we set at 0.1, we know that sufficient time has passed to show the next frame, so we increase the frame number by 1. If the frame now is greater than the number of images, then on the Love2D version I set it to the final frame. On this one I've set it to the initial frame. It doesn't seem to matter a great deal. The important thing is that we've set active to false so that the animation will stop. And then as long as the animation hasn't finished, we're still displaying a frame. The image is changed to the current frame, so it started off with the first, and then it progressively goes through second, third, fourth, right up until the 8th one, and then the rectangle is changed to a new one depending on the width scale of the current image, because each image is slightly different size to the previous one. And then we're returning whether or not the animation is still active, so it will be inactive if you've come to the end of the animation. The draw function, similar to what we've done before, we're passing the image, the position, the background colour, the rotation 0, origin 0. We're passing in the scale this time, so that this will be scaled on the fly, which is the same as Love2D but different from Pygame. Pygame were pre-scaled and then drawn in their scaled format. Here we're scaling them on the fly, and then of course drawing it. Now I have actually put in this one that you could draw the rectangle round the explosion if debug is on, but probably not necessary, but you can do it if you wish. So that's the explosions class. All it does is to run through a set of 8 images, displaying them one at a time over a period of time which you set using the frame rate here, so you can play about with that. Let's find out how this actually does its job. So I'll come back to the update in a second. Let's just show you how they get initiated. So if we go to, let's see, that would be some custom methods, I believe. Yep, there we go. So we don't want process events. Let's check first of all the mobs being hit by a bullet. So we've got most of this was running already, so we're playing a sound effect of the mob exploding, and then this is our new line. We're adding to the explosion list a new explosion, passing the mob explosions list. So we're passing it this list of 8 regular explosion images, and we're setting it to the center of the mob rectangle, which is the same as I did in Pygame. On Love2D I set it to the top of the bullet as it hit the mob. I don't think it makes a huge difference, and I've set it at 0.5 scale. So again, you could, depending on the size of the mob, you could alter that scale so that it played a bigger image for a bigger mob. Extremely easy to do. All we'd have to do is kind of copy this and pop it into this if-else statement, and alter the scale appropriately. So really easy to do, but at the moment I've just kind of left it at half size. So that's how the explosion is added to the list, and then once it's added to the list in the general update one here, we've got one that says update explosions passing delta time, and here's the update explosions function. So we're going through the list of explosions backwards as we usually do. We're checking to see whether we can update it. If we can't update it, that means it's finished playing all 8 frames, and then we remove it. The second one here is for the death explosion, which I haven't got started on yet, so let me show you the death explosion. That occurs when the player is hit. So we're now checking not the mob bullet ones, but the mob player. So when the player hits the mob, so as before, we're checking each mob to see if it's intersecting with the player, and if it is, we're reducing the shield, and then if the shield is less than or equal to 0, then we're effectively dead. So we were already playing the die sound, setting player alive to false, and here we're setting up our death explosion, again passing in the list of player explosions, which is the sonic ones, slightly different shape and size, centered on the top of the player rectangle. So that's where that explosion will start from, the top center of the player at full size, not 1. So we're not actually scaling it at all, we're giving it its full size. Again, you can alter that if you wish. So that initiates the death explosion when the player is hit. The update explosions deals with that. So if the death explosion is not null, in other words there is a death explosion, then it will run the rest of this. It'll update it. If it can't update it because the frames are finished, then it's set it to null. And at the same time it's setting the game state to quit. I don't think I did that in the other two, so let me just shut that off because we were checking in the player alive, if I remember right. Mob player conclusions, yeah. So if the player is alive, then we just update it as normal. Else, if the player is dead because we've been hit, we're then checking, is the death explosion equal to null? Then that means that the explosion has finished and the sound has finished, and then the state of the game is changed then to quit. So only once the graphics of the death explosion are stopped playing and the die sound effect has finished there. So that's how that one works. So I think this was what I've just commented out was from a previous this one here was a previous way I was trying to control when the player actually died, but that's not required. So let's save that and rerun it. So I'll just let myself get hit. There we go. So we died as we were supposed to there. Just play that once more, as it happened quite quickly. Shield going down, and we're dead. There we are. So that's how explosions work. So a little bit of clever way of doing the animations, given that we're not actually running a full animation, we're just changing a set of 8 frames. So it's a slightly different way of doing animations if you've done them before, but it works very well. So that's how we do it in Monogame.